Conspiratorial thinking is on the rise, and the problems this presents are very real and very dangerous. And if you're serious about addressing these problems, then the best thing you can do is rob the conspiracy theorists of the very few but unfortunately sometimes valid points that they make, thus removing the temptation for other people to fall down the conspiracy rabbit hole in the first place. For example, if a coworker who you weren't too close to, let's call him Alex, told you that cell phone radiation is poisoning you, or if he started talking about how sunscreen is actually more dangerous than the skin cancer that millions of people get every year from not wearing sunscreen, you'd rightly dismiss him as untrustworthy. But what happens when I show you the following clips?
Well, because you might have heard that carrying your phone in your pocket can reduce your testosterone levels and sperm count, and guess what? That is true. The data contained within this meta-analyses and other meta-analyses clearly point out that it can reduce sperm count and maybe testosterone levels significantly, but certainly sperm count and motility significantly. The question is, should you carry it in your front pocket if you're a male? I think to be on the safe side, the answer is probably avoid doing that too much of the time. Ideally, don't do it at all.
What is the headline stat there regarding testosterone in men? It's decreasing, isn't it, year over year?
Year over year, and more than half have either low normal or low levels. I've never seen anything like it. I've been measuring testosterone levels in my patients forever, and we're poisoning them.
Going back to your point about environmental toxins, I've always wondered if it was like pseudoscience that cosmetic products we have in our house are having an impact on our hormone levels. You were talking about hormone levels there.
So there's a number of substances which are known endocrine disruptors that are found in sunscreen. I think it's like one of the craziest things that we haven't made these products illegal at this point.
It's very hard to figure out which sunscreens are free of these compounds. I'm amazed that they're still on the market, frankly.
I've always geared towards the ones with the minerals that are like reflecting it.
But the only sunscreen that you should use is natural mineral sunscreen. Sorry, I shouldn't say that you should. I should say this is what I choose to do based on the data that I've seen.
Okay, that is somewhat concerning. It's one thing to dismiss our goofy coworker Alex, because what the hell does he know? But to claim that a Stanford neuroscientist, military psychiatrist, PhD biochemist, and billionaire research investor are all lying to you about the dangers of some of your consumer products, well, that would be a little conspiratorial. The problem is that if these individuals are correct, it means that the institutions that are supposed to be regulating these products, that we're supposed to trust, are wrong. And this is the key point of the video. You cannot trust institutions on every single issue, but you can trust them on most issues. If I want to know what the proper internal temperature to cook my beef or my pork at, I'm going to the FDA website. And if my child swallows some sort of chemical that I think might be poisonous, you can bet I'm going to poison control and not my herbal medicine guru down the street. The key question to ask is not, are institutions trustworthy? The key question to ask is, which issues should I trust institutions on? The answer is most of them, but not all. And many people are uncomfortable adopting this position because it feels like to say, well, institutions are sometimes wrong in significant ways, then you just validate all the fringe conspiracy theorists who say genuinely nutty stuff. And I will say very clearly, this is wrong. Again, by acknowledging the things the conspiracy theorists are right about, you rob them of their only good talking points, and then you become the voice of reason by speaking truthfully. For example, the conspiracy theorists will cite the cell phone's effect on sperm count and testosterone as evidence there's a 5G plot to cause bodily harm to the masses. But by acknowledging the facts that initially seem like they could be manipulated into this narrative, you can dismantle that from the start by pointing out that the harmful effects from the phone are not caused by 5G cell phone waves, but by the heat your cell phone generates.
This can open up a whole array of issues related to things like EMFs, and you've got people out there that have, ideas about 5G and all of this stuff. That is not what this discussion is about. The discussion I'm about to have with you relates to the fact that the electromagnetic fields and the heat-related effects of smartphones can indeed have a detrimental effect on sperm quality and, yes, indeed, on testosterone levels as well.
And what's more, you can acknowledge that institutions like the FDA do not have the most up-to-date information all the time, and you can still believe they're a net positive.
There are plenty of chemical products that are made that we use in everyday products that cause cancer. There is an endless string of things that are wrong with the systems of engineering that we do use. that doesn't mean that they're all bad. That doesn't mean that we then say, hey, you know what? Let's not do anything. Let's not do any engineering. Let's not use any antibiotics. Let's not use any technology. And if not for the advent of our engineering and our ingenuity and our ability as a species to create solutions through science, which allows us to do discovery, and then through engineering, which allows us to make solutions that solve problems that humans face, we would all be dead at a young age and we would not have realized the progress that we've had as a species.
All of this seems like common sense in a lot of ways, and yet there are still people who will look you in the face and with unabashed confidence tell you that every single thing that comes out of the mouth of certain people is by definition wrong. But unless you're a conspiracy theorist who believes an organization like TEDx is run by lizard people, you have no choice but to acknowledge that just because a crazy person says something doesn't mean that that something can't be true.
But not only do I not look like a professor, for most of my life, I haven't felt like a professor. For most of my life, I felt like just a little boy who likes frogs. That all changed a few years ago when a chemical company, the largest chemical company in the world, asked me to use my expertise in studying frog hormones to try to understand if the chemical, their number one selling product, a weed killer, atrazine, if it interfered with their hormones somehow. Long story short, we examined the African clawed frog in my lab, we exposed them to this chemical atrazine, and we showed things like this. And these are testes, and you don't have to have a PhD or be a frog expert to see that there's a difference between the control and the exposed animals. We later showed that some of these animals grow up, even though they're genetic males, to become completely functioning reproductive females, even though they were genetic males. We showed that in other species, the gonads look like this. So those are the testes on the top, and all of that junk in the trunk on the bottom, those are all eggs that are bursting through the surface of this male's testes. Now, I showed this to the Environmental Protection Agency because I thought they'd be interested. After all, it's the number one selling chemical in the world at the time. And they said, well, that's not really an adverse effect that would stimulate us to reassess the chemical.
This was the start of an epic feud between the scientist and the corporation.
Now a new article in the New Yorker magazine uses court documents from a class action lawsuit against Syngenta to show how it sought to prevent the Environmental Protection Agency from banning the profitable chemical, which is already banned by the European Union. To start with, the company's public relations team drafted a list of 4 goals. Reporter Rachel Aviv writes, quote, the first was, quote, discredit Hayes. In a spiral-bound notebook, Syngenta's communications manager, Sherry Ford, who referred to Hayes by his initials, wrote that the company could prevent citing of TH data by revealing him as non-credible.
So yeah, institutions can be corrupt and conspiracy theorists can be correct. But again, if you acknowledge when the conspiracy theorists are correct and you establish your credibility as someone who is genuinely interested in the truth regardless of how painful that truth might be, then you can easily point out when the conspiracy theorists are just actually engaging in regular incorrect conspiracy.
And so there's been a project that's been going on now for 12 plus years where they're taking large amounts of mosquitoes and breeding them specifically to have this bacteria in the mosquitoes. And then they release those mosquitoes into the wild. And over time, the bacterial infected mosquitoes start to become a larger percentage of the population. And as a result, the vector of carrying these awful viruses into humans goes way down. So I really get ticked off when I see guys like RFK Jr. and others not just propagate this BS misinformation spiel about, oh, genetically modified this and that, science is bad, but to then say, should we be messing with the natural world? Because I would say to him, what about when your kid got infected and you gave your kid antibiotics? Maybe you shouldn't have done that.
And when you become the kind of person who can deal with this nuance, you can recognize that even the people who are most known for talking about the conspiracies of globalists and so on and so forth, even those people understand that it doesn't have to be a cabal of people making decisions behind the scenes to, use the 5G to wipe people out. It's just the world is complex, there are bad incentives, and sometimes those incentives align in such a way that fosters corruption.
But you don't need a formal conspiracy when interests converge. These people went to the same universities and fraternities. They're on the same boards of directors. They're on the same country clubs. They have like interests. They don't need to call a meeting. They know what's good for them, and they're getting it.
People are inclined at the moment to think conspiratorially. They say it's as if there's a cabal behind the scenes maneuvering in a particular direction. And I would say There are micro cabals now and then acting out this archetypal pattern, but the conspiracy itself is actually a network of associated ideas that have an animating spirit within them that possesses people en masse, and they act in accordance with its dictates.
So when it comes to trusting institutions, you can trust them on most issues. But on issues that are obviously controversial, or on issues where there are a number of credible individuals that diverge from the institutional consensus, those issues in particular are probably worth opening your mind and looking into a little deeper. And so with that, as always, good luck and Godspeed.